So we're really getting to the heart of Bitcoin. And
Yeah.
to help us do that, we're going deep on this interview with David, this Bitcoin policy expert. And
Really interesting guy.
yeah, he's only 25,
Yeah.
which I have to say is kind of mind-blowing
I know, right?
to be such a leading voice in this space at such a young age. So that's pretty impressive. But
Definitely. What I found really interesting is how he sees competition in currency as this like beneficial thing for everyone,
right.
which is a very like Hayekian perspective.
Yeah.
Like a free market, the best systems will win out. And that really fuels his passion for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear because it's
Right.
not just about,
For sure.
making a quick buck or whatever.
Right, right.
It's about giving people options.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this leads us to, I think, his central argument, which is Bitcoin as an insurance policy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's basically saying Bitcoin has this potential to like safeguard your wealth, right? Against things like inflation, censorship, government overreach, all things that I know you think about a lot.
For sure, for sure.
It's that idea that your money, it's protected in a way that's not controlled by a single entity. And that's powerful, especially today.
Absolutely. In a world that feels increasingly uncertain.
Exactly, yeah. And this resonates super deeply in developing nations, by the way. Think about places that have experienced unstable currencies, authoritarian regimes.
Right.
The dollar, while it's a powerful symbol, it has its limitations.
Yeah, for sure.
Bitcoin, he's saying, offers this potential alternative, especially in places where that trust is low.
But, this appeal isn't limited to developing countries.
Exactly.
Even in places like the U.S.
Yeah.
There's a growing feeling that traditional finance just doesn't offer that same level of autonomy.
Absolutely. It's about having more control over your financial life, which is so key in an increasingly digital world. People are drawn to that idea of safeguarding their savings.
From things like inflation,
Mm.
capital controls even, which is basically the government restricting access to your own money.
It's wild. One thing that struck me about David is he was very open about his own journey and understanding Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, even he's still figuring it out. And it just makes you realize it's okay to not have all the answers. This is complex stuff. And even someone who's a policy expert in the space is humbled by it.
Totally. And I think that's what makes him such an effective advocate, to be honest.
Sure.
He's not trying to, sell you on Bitcoin.
Right.
He's inviting you to explore it alongside him.
Right.
Weigh those potential benefits and drawbacks.
Yeah. Which brings us to the often contentious world of politics. I mean, this interview took place right before the 2024 U.S. election.
Oh, wow.
And there was a lot of talk about how a Trump presidency might be good for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and David acknowledged that. He's saying, a president openly supportive of Bitcoin, it could lead to more favorable regulations, at least in the short term.
Yeah. However, he also voices this concern about Bitcoin becoming overly politicized.
Of course, yeah.
Turning into this, us versus them issue.
Right, everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon.
Exactly.
Even if they don't fully grasp what they're supporting.
And it's interesting because David's particularly wary of what he calls the secret theory of Congress.
Okay, I got to be honest, that one has me a little lost.
So essentially, he argues that politicians, they're more likely to engage with these complex topics when they're less understood by the public.
Oh, interesting.
It gives them more leeway to shape policy without as much scrutiny.
Because no one knows any better.
Exactly. So Bitcoin's current popularity might actually make it harder to implement sensible regulation.
Because everyone wants to be seen as, doing something.
Precisely.
Even if it's not the right thing.
And that leads us to the potential dangers of a Biden-Harris administration, at least according to David. He mentions the possibility of excise taxes on Bitcoin mining transactions as a way to kind of stifle its growth under this guise of regulation.
Right. Which almost proves Bitcoin's point, doesn't it? The more the government tries to control it, the more attractive it becomes as this alternative.
It definitely raises that question. David even proposes this thought experiment. Could a U.S. ban on Bitcoin backfire? Could it spark mass civil disobedience and ultimately strengthen the case for decentralized currencies?
It's like trying to contain something that thrives on being uncontainable. Try to extinguish it, and it only grows stronger.
Totally. And this whole idea of control, especially with technology, it's where the conversation takes a really interesting turn. It gets into freedom of speech and how technology shapes our values, which I know is something you think about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's easy to think of free speech as this abstract ideal, but Peter's story about the UK Football Association really brings it home.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
It really highlights how different cultures view this very fundamental freedom.
Right, like what flies in one place
Exactly.
could get you in trouble in another.
So Peter's visiting some Bitcoin mines in Africa with Alex Gladstein,
Okay, yeah, I know, Alex.
big advocate for Bitcoin and human rights. Anyway, they go shooting, right? Just part of the trip.
Sure.
Peter posts this photo of himself holding a gun,
Right.
peace sign, the whole bit, Seems pretty tame,
Totally, yeah.
especially in that context, right?
Yeah, just documenting an experience.
Exactly. But the UK Football Association, they try to censor it,
Whoa, really?
claiming it was bad for the sport's image.
Wow, see, that's such a different world than here.
Right. Like, what's considered protected speech here?
Totally.
Even something like that, holding a gun,
Yeah.
could land you in trouble over there. They have much stricter hate speech laws.
Makes you wonder where we draw the line.
Right. Who gets to decide?
Exactly.
And Peter talks about this, like, chilling effect
Oh, for sure.
that censorship creates. People become afraid to express themselves, even when it's perfectly legal.
Absolutely. It just stifles everything. Our ability to have open dialogue, exchange ideas.
Right. And then it raises the question, what happens when we let algorithms start dictating what is and isn't okay?
Oof. Yeah, that's the big one, isn't it? That's where AI comes in.
Right. And this is something I know you think a lot about,
Oh, constantly. It's both fascinating and terrifying.
like those aha moments, the way tech can challenge what we think we know.
Mm.
It's part of what makes this whole deep dive so compelling.
It's all connected, right? From Bitcoin as this insurance policy to government regulations, censorship, and now AI. It's all part of this bigger picture about the future.
And it's not all doom and gloom.
Hopefully not.
I mean, take Peter. He talks about using AI to probe for interviews, like this one even. Says it helps him process info faster, ask better questions. He even wonders if, in a way, AI is making us smarter.
It's a good question. I mean, it can definitely make us more efficient. But David, he offers a counterpoint, which I think is important to hear.
What's that?
He's worried about AI making us, well, intellectually lazy.
Oh, interesting.
Like we outsource critical thinking to algorithms.
Oh, so we become reliant on it.
Exactly. And it goes back to that Goldilocks effect he mentioned.
Remind me about that.
So when we're given a bunch of options, we tend to pick the middle ground, even if it's not the best choice, logically.
Because it feels safe, familiar.
Right. And David's suggesting AI could use that against us,
Oh, yeah.
subtly pushing us towards certain outcomes.
Even if we don't realize it.
Exactly. It's like this subtle form of control, all under the guise of objectivity.
Because we see AI as neutral.
Exactly. Which makes it even more insidious in a way.
Wow. Okay, so we've got Bitcoin, this potential tool for freedom, empowerment, and AI, which could be used for control, manipulation. It's like we're at a crossroads.
We are, yeah, with very different potential futures ahead.
Utopia or dystopia?
$1 million question. And it's something I want you to consider. How does all of this technology intersect with your life, your values? The fact we're even asking these questions, that's the power of this whole deep dive, right? It makes us think critically about the stuff we're creating and how it could impact us.
For sure. It's not about easy answers. It's about asking the right questions.
Exactly.
It's like that Black Mirror episode where they...
Wait, save that rabbit hole for another
Yeah.
time. But you're right. Storytelling, it helps us make sense of all this.
And it makes it real.
Exactly. And David has this great story about his experience with, like, a voice-based chatbot.
Oh, yeah. The
That
one
per-
that was so real it freaked him out a little.
That's the one. He's having this deep conversation with this AI.
Right.
And it was so convincing. It blurred the lines between human and machine and made him ask, like, what happens when we can't tell the difference?
Between a real person and AI.
Yeah. Will we even be able to? And more importantly, will it matter?
It really makes you think about what it means to be human in this tech-driven world. It does make you think. As tech gets more advanced, are we going to reach this point where that line just disappears?
It's a question that gets at the core of what it means to be human, right? And what's so interesting about David is that he doesn't shy away from that. These complex, kind of unsettling questions.
Yeah.
He's not just giving us info, he's making us confront what it all means.
It's true. And for someone like you who's always learning, engaging with these big ideas,
For sure.
I think that's got to be really valuable.
Oh, absolutely. Getting pushed outside our comfort zones, that's where the real growth happens.
Right. And this whole conversation, this deep dive, it's been anything but comfortable. We've gone from Bitcoin as this potential safety net
Right.
to regulation, censorship, and now AI.
Yeah.
And with AI, it's like the very definition of intelligence is up for grabs.
And it's all connected. Bitcoin, freedom, AI, they're all part of this bigger story
Yeah.
about power, control, and what it means to be human in this increasingly technological world.
It's like we're standing on the edge of something, I don't know, unknown, full of potential, but also kind of terrifying.
And that brings us to the question I want to leave you with.
Okay, shoot.
What happens when AI surpasses us in every way? What happens when it can do everything we can do, only better, including maybe hosting podcasts?
Okay, now that's a little creepy to think about.
Right.
Are we going to be obsolete? Or will it free us up to focus on things that are, well, uniquely human? Creativity, empathy, things AI might never replicate.
That's the crux of it. Will AI be our downfall, or will it help us thrive? We're leaving you with more questions than answers, but hopefully this deep dive has given you a new way to look at the challenges and the opportunities that are ahead. The future isn't set in stone, and the choices we make now will determine where we end up. So what role will you play in shaping this uncertain but definitely fascinating future?